The relentless patter of rain against the windows of Starlight Industries' imposing skyscraper mirrored the tears that threatened to spill from Ethan Miller's eyes. The young man, barely 28 years old, stood before the floor-to-ceiling glass, his reflection a ghostly apparition against the gray New York City skyline. His shoulders, once squared with determination and hope, now slumped under the weight of constant humiliation and despair. Ethan's mind drifted back to that fateful day 3 years ago when he'd first stepped into this building, bright-eyed and bursting with ambition. Fresh out of college with a degree in business administration, he'd beaten out hundreds of applicants for an entry-level position at one of the most prestigious corporations in the country. Little did he know that his dream job would become a nightmare of epic proportions. A booming voice shattered Ethan's reverie. "Miller! Where's that coffee I asked for an hour ago?" The harsh tone belonged to none other than Victor Blackwood, CEO of Starlight Industries and Ethan's personal tormentor. Ethan's heart raced as he scrambled away from the window, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to reach the break room. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood," he called out, his voice trembling. "I'll have it ready in just a moment." As Ethan fumbled with the coffee maker, his mind reeled with a cacophony of cruel memories. Victor Blackwood's face, twisted in a sneer, flashed before his eyes. "You're nothing but a worthless errand boy, Miller," the CEO had spat at him just yesterday, in front of the entire board of directors. "I don't know why I even keep you around." The other executives had laughed, their mocking tones cutting through Ethan like knives. He'd stood there, face burning with shame, unable to defend himself. After all, what could he say? He was just a lowly assistant, expendable and insignificant in the grand scheme of things. With shaking hands, Ethan prepared Victor's coffee exactly as he liked it, black, no sugar, with just a hint of cinnamon. As he carried the steaming mug back to the CEO's office, he couldn't help but wonder how his life had come to this. He'd always been a kind and hardworking person, raised by loving parents who taught him the value of humility and perseverance. But in the cutthroat world of corporate America, those virtues seemed to be nothing but weaknesses to be exploited. "It's about time," Victor growled as Ethan entered the opulent office. The CEO sat behind a massive mahogany desk, his steel gray eyes boring into Ethan with unmistakable disdain. "I swear, Miller, a trained monkey could do your job better than you." Ethan's cheeks burned as he set the coffee down carefully. "I apologize for the delay, sir. Is there anything else I can do for you?" Victor's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Yes, actually. The Johnson meeting is in an hour, and I need you to prepare the conference room. Make sure everything is perfect, or it'll be your head on the chopping block." "Understood?" "Yes, Mr. Blackwood," Ethan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll take care of it right away." As he turned to leave, Victor's voice stopped him cold. "Oh, and Miller? Wear something decent for once. That bargain bin suit of yours is an embarrassment to this company." Ethan's eyes stung with unshed tears as he nodded silently and left the office. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall for a moment, struggling to regain his composure. He thought of his mother, battling cancer in a hospital across town, and his father, working 2 jobs to keep up with the mounting medical bills. They were the reason he endured this daily torment. His meager salary was the only thing keeping them afloat. With a deep breath, Ethan straightened his shoulders and made his way to the conference room. As he began setting up for the meeting, arranging water glasses and notepads with meticulous care, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had to change. He couldn't go on like this forever, could he? Little did Ethan know that fate was about to intervene in the most unexpected way. Across town, in a dingy apartment that had seen better days, Olivia Martinez stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The young investigative journalist had been working on a story about corporate corruption for months, and what she just uncovered about Starlight Industries made her blood run cold. "This can't be right," she muttered, running a hand through her unruly dark curls. "If this is true, it could bring down the entire company." Olivia's eyes darted to the framed photo on her desk, a picture of her and her late father, taken just days before the accident that had claimed his life. He'd been a janitor at Starlight Industries, always speaking highly of the company and its CEO, Victor Blackwood. But if what Olivia had discovered was true, her father's loyalty had been tragically misplaced. With trembling fingers, she reached for her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Hey, Jake," she said when her editor picked up. "I think I've got something big. Really big. But I need more time to verify everything." Jake's gruff voice crackled through the speaker. "How big are we talking, Martinez?" Olivia took a deep breath. "Embezzlement, fraud, possible connections to organized crime, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. If I'm right about this, Jake, it could be the story of the decade." There was a long pause before Jake responded. "All right, you've got 2 weeks. But be careful, kid. If Starlight Industries is as dirty as you say, they're not going to take kindly to someone poking around in their business." As Olivia hung up the phone, a chill ran down her spine. She knew the risks involved in pursuing this story, but something deep inside her wouldn't let it go. Maybe it was the memory of her father, or perhaps it was her innate sense of justice. Whatever the reason, Olivia knew she had to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. Little did she know that her path was about to intersect with that of a humble, downtrodden assistant named Ethan Miller, and that their unlikely alliance would set in motion a chain of events that would shake Starlight Industries to its very core. Back at Starlight Industries, Ethan had just finished preparing the conference room when he overheard a heated conversation coming from Victor Blackwood's office. Curiosity got the better of him, and he found himself inching closer to the partially open door. "I don't care what it takes, Roberts," Victor's voice snarled. "Those documents cannot see the light of day. Do you understand me? If word gets out about Project Phoenix, we're all finished." Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. Project Phoenix? He'd never heard of it before, and he prided himself on knowing every aspect of the company's operations, no matter how menial his own tasks might be. "But sir," another voice, presumably Robert's, replied, "what about the ethical implications? If the public finds out?" "To hell with ethics!" Victor roared, causing Ethan to flinch. "I've worked too hard and come too far to let some bleeding heart morality derail everything now. Handle it, Roberts. Or I'll find someone who will." The sound of approaching footsteps sent Ethan scurrying away from the door, his mind reeling from what he just heard. For the first time since he'd started working at Starlight Industries, a seed of doubt began to take root in his heart. What was Victor Blackwood involved in? And more importantly, what should Ethan do about it? As he made his way back to his tiny cubicle, Ethan's gaze fell upon a framed photo of his parents. Their smiling faces seemed to bore into him, reminding him of the values they'd instilled in him from a young age. Honesty, integrity, compassion, these were the principles that had guided him throughout his life. Could he really turn a blind eye to whatever nefarious activities were happening right under his nose? The internal struggle was interrupted by the harsh ring of his phone. "Ethan Miller speaking," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Miller, get your useless self up to the conference room now," Victor barked. "The Johnson meeting is about to start, and I need you to take notes. Try not to embarrass me for once in your miserable life." "Yes, Mr. Blackwood." "I'm on my way," Ethan replied, his tone betraying none of the turmoil roiling within him. As he gathered his notepad and rushed towards the elevator, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the precipice of something monumental. The humble assistant who had endured countless humiliations was about to stumble upon a secret that would change everything, not just for him, but for everyone connected to Starlight Industries. Little did Ethan know that across town, a determined journalist named Olivia Martinez was piecing together the very puzzle he just stumbled upon. Their paths were destined to cross, and when they did, the foundations of Starlight Industries would be shaken to their very core. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the opulent top floor where the most important meetings took place. Ethan stepped out, his heart pounding in his chest. As he approached the conference room, he made a silent vow to himself. No matter what happened next, he would stay true to the values his parents had taught him. He would find a way to uncover the truth, even if it meant risking everything he'd worked for. With a deep breath, Ethan pushed open the conference room door, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The game was about to change, and the humble assistant was unwittingly about to become the catalyst for a corporate revolution that would leave everyone, including the arrogant CEO, utterly stunned. Olivia Martinez sat in her car, parked across the street from Starlight Industries' imposing headquarters. She'd been there for hours, watching employees come and go, trying to work up the courage to make her move. The file folder on the passenger seat contained months of research, carefully gathered evidence that pointed to a web of corruption at the highest levels of the company. "Come on, Olivia," she muttered to herself. "Dad always said you were the brave one. Prove him right." With a deep breath, she grabbed the folder and stepped out of the car. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as she made her way towards the building's entrance. Her heart raced with each step, knowing that what she was about to do could either make her career or destroy it completely. As Olivia pushed through the revolving doors, she nearly collided with a young man in a slightly ill-fitting suit. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, reaching out to steady him. Ethan Miller looked up, momentarily stunned by the beautiful woman before him. No, it's my fault," he stammered. "I wasn't watching where I was going." Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. There was something in the woman's gaze, a mixture of determination and vulnerability, that resonated deeply with Ethan. Before he could say anything else, however, a familiar voice shattered the moment. "Miller! Stop flirting and get back to work, you useless imbecile." Victor Blackwood's imposing figure loomed in the lobby, his face twisted in its usual sneer of contempt. Ethan's cheeks burned with humiliation as he mumbled another apology to Olivia and hurried towards his boss. Olivia watched the exchange with growing interest. The young man's subservient demeanor and the older man's cruel treatment stirred something within her. Could this be the inside source she'd been hoping for? As Victor berated Ethan in full view of everyone in the lobby, Olivia made a split-second decision. She approached the pair, putting on her most professional smile. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear and confident. "I'm Olivia Martinez from the New York Times. I was hoping to speak with someone about Starlight Industries' recent philanthropic initiatives." Victor's demeanor changed instantly, his scowl transforming into a practiced smile. "Of course, Ms. Martinez. We're always happy to discuss our charitable work. Why don't you come up to my office?" As Victor led Olivia towards the elevator, she caught Ethan's eye once more. There was something there, a flicker of, what? Recognition? Understanding? Whatever it was, Olivia knew instinctively that this unassuming assistant might be the key to unraveling the entire Starlight Industries mystery. Little did either of them know that this chance encounter would set in motion a series of events that would change both their lives forever. The humble assistant and the determined journalist were about to embark on a journey that would test their courage, challenge their convictions, and ultimately expose a truth so shocking it would leave the entire city reeling. As the elevator doors closed, separating Ethan and Olivia, fate began to weave its intricate web. The stage was set for a drama of epic proportions, one that would pit the powerless against the powerful, and prove that even the humblest among us can rise to become heroes in the face of overwhelming odds. The following days passed in a blur for Ethan. He couldn't shake the memory of the enigmatic journalist he'd encountered in the lobby. There was something about her, a fire in her eyes, a determination in her stance, that haunted his thoughts. But more than that, her presence had stirred something within him, a longing for, what? Justice? Purpose? He couldn't quite put his finger on it. As he went about his daily tasks, fetching coffee and enduring Victor's endless stream of insults, Ethan found himself paying closer attention to the goings-on around him. Hushed conversations in corners, meaningful glances exchanged between executives, documents hastily shoved into drawers when he entered a room, all of it seemed to point to something bigger, something sinister lurking beneath. Starlight Industries' gleaming surface. One rainy afternoon, as Ethan was organizing files in Victor's office, the CEO was out at a business lunch that would undoubtedly stretch into the evening. His elbow accidentally knocked a stack of papers off the desk. As he scrambled to gather them, a single word caught his eye: Phoenix. His heart racing, Ethan glanced towards the door before allowing himself a closer look. What he saw made his blood run cold. Financial reports, offshore account numbers, and what appeared to be bribes to government officials, all connected to something called Project Phoenix. "Oh my God," Ethan whispered, his hands shaking as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. This was it, the proof of corruption he'd overheard Victor discussing. But what should he do with this information? As if in answer to his unspoken question, a business card fluttered to the floor. Olivia Martinez, investigative journalist, it read, along with a phone number. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Could this be a sign? Before he could second-guess himself, Ethan snapped a few hasty photos of the documents with his phone. He just finished replacing everything on the desk when Victor's voice boomed from the hallway. "I don't care what it takes, Roberts. Make it happen, or you'll be looking for a new job faster than you can say unemployment." Ethan barely had time to compose himself before Victor burst into the office, his face flushed with anger and something else. Was that fear in the CEO's eyes? "What are you still doing here, Miller?" Victor snapped, his gaze darting suspiciously around the room. Just finishing up some filing, sir," Ethan stammered. "I was just leaving." As he hurried out of the office, Ethan could feel Victor's eyes boring into his back. His heart pounded in his chest, the weight of his discovery threatening to overwhelm him. He knew he should feel terrified. After all, he just uncovered evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful men in New York. But mixed with the fear was something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That night, in the safety of his tiny apartment, Ethan stared at Olivia's business card for what felt like hours. The right thing to do was clear, but the consequences terrified him. If he reached out to her, he'd be putting everything on the line: his job, his ability to support his parents, maybe even his safety. But if he stayed silent, could he live with himself knowing the truth about Starlight Industries? With trembling fingers, Ethan picked up his phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang once, twice, 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Olivia Martinez speaking." Ethan's throat went dry. "Ms. Martinez? This is Ethan Miller. We met briefly at Starlight Industries earlier this week." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Miller," Olivia said, her voice cautious but intrigued. "I remember you. Is everything all right?" I think I have some information you might be interested in," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "About Starlight Industries. About Victor Blackwood." The silence that followed was deafening. When Olivia spoke again, her tone was deadly serious. "Meet me at the corner cafe on 5th and Pine in an hour. Come alone, and make sure you're not followed." As Ethan hung up the phone, a mix of exhilaration and terror coursed through his veins. There was no going back now. The corner cafe was nearly empty when Ethan arrived, his collar turned up against the light drizzle that had started to fall. He spotted Olivia in a corner booth, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her eyes scanning the room with practiced vigilance. As Ethan slid into the seat across from her, Olivia leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "Before we start, I need you to understand something, Mr. Miller. What you're about to tell me could be dangerous, for both of us. Are you sure you want to do this?" Ethan swallowed hard, thinking of his parents, of the years of humiliation he'd endured at Starlight Industries. Then he thought of the documents he'd seen, the hushed conversations he'd overheard. He met Olivia's gaze steadily. "I'm sure." For the next hour, Ethan poured out everything he knew, the overheard conversations, the mysterious Project Phoenix, the documents he'd photographed. Olivia listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes in a small notebook. When Ethan finished, Olivia sat back, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. "This is huge, Ethan," she said, using his first name for the first time. "If what you're saying is true, it could bring down not just Starlight Industries, but half the corporate bigwigs in New York." "So what do we do now?" Ethan asked, feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified. Olivia's eyes gleamed with determination. "Now, we dig deeper. I've been investigating Starlight for months, but your information fills in crucial gaps. We need to gather more evidence, build an airtight case before we go public." As they discussed their next steps, neither Ethan nor Olivia noticed the man in the dark suit seated at the bar, his attention focused intently on their conversation. The following weeks were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and covert information gathering. By day, Ethan continued his role as Victor's long-suffering assistant, enduring the CEO's abuse with newfound resilience. Every snide comment, every humiliating task now felt like a small price to pay for the chance to expose the truth. By night, he worked with Olivia, piecing together the puzzle of Project Phoenix. They discovered a complex web of offshore accounts, shell companies, and bribed officials, all orchestrated by Victor Blackwood and his inner circle to siphon millions from Starlight Industries' pension fund. As they worked, Ethan found himself drawn more and more to Olivia. Her passion for justice, her unwavering determination in the face of danger, it awakened something in him he'd thought long buried beneath years of subservience and self-doubt. One night, as they pored over financial records in Olivia's cramped apartment, their hands brushed as they reached for the same document. Ethan looked up, his breath catching as he met Olivia's gaze. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. "Ethan," Olivia said softly, her eyes searching his. I need you to know something. This investigation, it's personal for me. My father, he worked for Starlight Industries for 30 years. He died thinking Victor Blackwood was a good man, that the company cared about its employees." Tears glistened in Olivia's eyes as she continued. "When I started digging into Starlight's finances, I had no idea I'd uncover something this big. But now I feel like I owe it to my dad, to all the employees who've been cheated, to see this through." Without thinking, Ethan reached out and took Olivia's hand in his. "We'll see it through together," he said, surprising himself with the strength in his voice. "Whatever it takes." The moment was shattered by a sharp knock at the door. Ethan and Olivia froze, exchanging alarmed glances. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Ms. Martinez?" a gruff voice called out. "This is Detective Reeves from the NYPD. We need to talk." Olivia's face paled. "The police? How did they?" Ethan's mind raced. Had they been discovered? Was this Victor's doing? As Olivia moved cautiously towards the door, Ethan quickly gathered their most sensitive documents, shoving them into his briefcase. Whatever happened next, they couldn't let their evidence fall into the wrong hands. Olivia opened the door a crack, the security chain still in place. Detective Reeves? Can I see some identification, please? As the detective fumbled for his badge, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text message. His blood ran cold as he read it. I know what you're doing, Miller. Meet me at the office in 1 hour, or your parents will pay the price for your betrayal. VB. Ethan's world spun. How had Victor found out? And more importantly, what was he going to do now? Back at Starlight Industries, Victor Blackwood paced his opulent office like a caged lion. His carefully constructed empire was teetering on the brink of collapse, all because of a sniveling assistant and a meddling journalist. Roberts, he barked into the intercom. Get in here now. Moments later, a nervous-looking man in his 50s scurried into the office. Yes, Mr. Blackwood? Victor's eyes blazed with barely contained fury. I want everything we have on Ethan Miller and Olivia Martinez. Family, friends, financial records, everything. If we're going down, I'm taking them with us. As Roberts hurried out to do his bidding, Victor turned to stare out at the New York skyline. For years, he'd ruled the city from his lofty perch, amassing wealth and power through any means necessary. He'd crushed countless opponents, ruined lives without a second thought. But never had he faced a threat quite like this. A humble assistant and a determined journalist, it was almost laughable. Yet here he was, the great Victor Blackwood, brought to the edge of ruin by two insignificant nobodies. Well, if they wanted a war, he'd give them one. By the time he was done, Ethan Miller and Olivia Martinez would wish they'd never been born. Ethan's mind raced as he made his way to Starlight Industries. He'd managed to slip away from Olivia's apartment while she dealt with Detective Reeves, leaving her a hastily scrawled note explaining the situation. Now, as he approached the looming skyscraper, he felt like a man walking to his own execution. The lobby was eerily quiet as Ethan stepped off the elevator on the top floor. Victor's secretary was nowhere to be seen, unusual for this time of night. With each step towards the CEO's office, Ethan's heart pounded louder in his chest. He paused outside the heavy oak door, taking a deep breath to steady himself. Whatever happened next, he had to be strong. For his parents, for Olivia, for all the people Victor had wronged over the years. Ethan knocked once, then pushed the door open. Victor Blackwood stood by the window, his back to the room, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. "Ah, Miller," Victor said without turning around. "So good of you to join me. Please, have a seat." Ethan remained standing, his fists clenched at his sides. "What do you want, Mr. Blackwood?" Victor turned slowly, his face a mask of cold fury. "What do I want? I want you to explain to me why my most pitiful, incompetent employee is suddenly meeting with investigative journalists and digging into company finances." He stalked towards Ethan, his voice rising with each word. "I want to know why the little worm I've crushed beneath my heel for years thinks he has the right to try and bring me down." Ethan stood his ground, meeting Victor's gaze with a defiance that surprised even himself. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said quietly. "Because what you're doing is wrong, and someone has to stop you." Victor's laugh was harsh and mirthless. "Stop me? You?" He shook his head, taking another sip of his drink. "Oh, Miller. I almost admire your pathetic attempt at bravery. But let me make something very clear to you." He set his glass down on the desk with a sharp click. "I own this city. The police, the judges, the politicians, they all dance to my tune. Your little crusade for justice? It ends tonight." Victor reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Inside here is enough evidence to put your parents away for a very long time. Tax evasion, insurance fraud, amazing what a team of creative accountants can fabricate, isn't it?" Ethan's blood ran cold. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Victor's smile was shark-like. "Am I? Are you willing to take that chance, Miller? Are you willing to sacrifice your parents' freedom for your misguided sense of righteousness?" For a moment, Ethan faltered. The thought of his parents, his kind, hardworking parents who'd sacrificed everything for him, facing jail time was almost too much to bear. But then he thought of Olivia, of the determination in her eyes when she spoke of justice. He thought of all the families who'd lost their life savings because of Victor's greed. Drawing himself up to his full height, Ethan met Victor's gaze steadily. "Do your worst, Mr. Blackwood. I'm not backing down." Victor's eyes widened in genuine surprise, then narrowed dangerously. "Very well, Miller. You've made your choice. Don't say I didn't warn you." He reached for the phone on his desk, but before he could dial, the office door burst open. Olivia Martinez strode in, followed by a team of FBI agents. "Victor Blackwood," the lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." As the agents handcuffed a sputtering, disbelieving Victor, Olivia rushed to Ethan's side. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes scanning him for any sign of harm. Ethan nodded, still in shock at the sudden turn of events. How did you know?" Olivia smiled, a mix of relief and triumph on her face. "Detective Reeves wasn't there to arrest us. He's been working with the FBI, building a case against Blackwood for months. When I told him about our evidence, he fast-tracked the arrest warrant." As they watched Victor being led away, his threats and curses echoing down the hallway, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was over. They'd won. Olivia took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You did it, Ethan. You stood up to him even when he threatened your family. You're the bravest person I know." Ethan looked at her, seeing not just the fierce journalist, but the compassionate, determined woman he'd come to admire, and maybe even love. "We did it," he corrected her softly. "Together." As they left the Starlight Industries building, stepping out into the cool night air, Ethan felt like a new man. The humble assistant who'd endured years of humiliation was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, someone who'd faced his fears and emerged victorious. But little did Ethan know, this was just the beginning. The fall of Victor Blackwood had set in motion a chain of events that would shake New York's corporate world to its core. And at the center of it all, a most unlikely pair, the once meek assistant and the crusading journalist, would find themselves facing challenges and dangers beyond anything they could have imagined. As they walked away from Starlight Industries for what they thought was the last time, Ethan and Olivia were blissfully unaware of the storm gathering on the horizon. A storm that would test their newfound strength, their budding relationship, and the very foundations of everything they believed in. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Victor Blackwood's arrest made headlines across the country, sending shockwaves through the corporate world. Ethan and Olivia found themselves at the center of a media frenzy, hailed as heroes for their role in exposing the corruption at Starlight Industries. For Ethan, it was a dizzying change. Gone were the days of fetching coffee and enduring constant humiliation. Now, he was being interviewed on national news programs, asked to speak at conferences on corporate ethics, and even approached about book deals. Through it all, Olivia remained by his side, a steady presence that kept him grounded. Their relationship had blossomed in the aftermath of Victor's arrest, growing deeper with each passing day. Ethan marveled at how natural it felt to be with her, how her strength and passion seemed to bring out the best in him. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Olivia's apartment, watching the sunset over the New York skyline, Ethan turned to her with a serious expression. "Liv," he said softly, using the nickname he'd given her, "I've been thinking. With everything that's happened, with all we've been through together, I don't want to waste any more time. Olivia's eyes widened as Ethan dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Olivia Martinez, will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes as she nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, she pulled him close, kissing him with a passion that spoke volumes. But even in this moment of joy, a shadow loomed on the horizon. Neither Ethan nor Olivia noticed the figure watching them from a car parked across the street, his eyes cold with calculation and barely suppressed rage. In a maximum security prison upstate, Victor Blackwood sat in his cell, a far cry from the luxurious office he once commanded. But even here, stripped of his wealth and power, the former CEO's mind was working overtime. A guard approached his cell, glancing furtively down the hallway before slipping a small cell phone through the bars. 2 minutes, he growled. Not a second more. Victor snatched the phone, quickly dialing a number he knew by heart. "Roberts," he hissed when the call connected. "Tell me you have good news." The voice on the other end was nervous, but eager to please. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Everything's in place. The offshore accounts you set up years ago are still intact. And I've made contact with our friends in low places." A cold smile spread across Victor's face. "Excellent. And what about our lovebirds? Miller and Martinez?" Roberts paused. "They just got engaged. They think it's all over, that they've won." Victor's laugh was harsh and humorless. "Oh, it's far from over. In fact, the real game is just beginning. Keep watching them, Roberts. And make sure our other plans stay on track." It's time to remind everyone why Victor Blackwood is not a man to be trifled with. As the guard approached to reclaim the phone, Victor's eyes glinted with malice. The pawns were in place, and soon, very soon, Ethan Miller and Olivia Martinez would learn the true cost of crossing him. The sun-drenched terrace of the Plaza Hotel buzzed with excitement as New York's elite gathered to celebrate the engagement of the city's newest power couple. Ethan Miller, now hailed as a corporate whistleblower and champion of ethics, stood arm in arm with his fiancée, Olivia Martinez, whose exposé on Starlight Industries had catapulted her to journalistic stardom. As they made their way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about their upcoming nuptials, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how much his life had changed in just a few short months. Gone was the meek, downtrodden assistant who'd endured years of abuse at Victor Blackwood's hands. In his place stood a man confident in his convictions, bolstered by the love of an extraordinary woman. "Mr. Miller," a voice called out. Ethan turned to see Charles Winthrop, CEO of one of New York's most prestigious investment firms, approaching with a champagne flute in hand. "I must say, you've become quite the toast of the town. Have you given any thought to what's next for you?" Before Ethan could respond, Olivia squeezed his arm gently. "Actually, we have some exciting news on that front," she said, her eyes shining with pride. Ethan's been offered a position as head of the new Ethics and Compliance Division at Wainwright Corporation. Charles's eyebrows shot up. "Wainwright? Impressive. They're known for being one of the most ethically run companies in the country. Congratulations, my boy. You've certainly come a long way." As Charles moved on to mingle with other guests, Ethan pulled Olivia close, planting a soft kiss on her forehead. "Have I told you lately how much I love you?" he murmured. Olivia laughed, a sound that never failed to make Ethan's heart soar. "Only about a dozen times today. But I wouldn't mind hearing it again." Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by the arrival of Ethan's parents, Thomas and Eleanor Miller. The couple had been thrust into the spotlight alongside their son, and while they were immensely proud of Ethan's achievements, the attention clearly made them uncomfortable. "Oh, sweetheart," Eleanor said, enveloping Ethan in a warm embrace. "This is all so grand. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer something a bit more modest? Ethan exchanged a knowing glance with Olivia. They'd had this conversation before. His parents, simple, hardworking folk who'd struggled to make ends meet for much of their lives, found it difficult to adjust to their son's newfound fame and fortune. "Mom, Dad," Ethan said gently, "I know this is all a bit overwhelming. But Olivia and I want to celebrate with everyone who's supported us. And that includes all the people who've reached out since the Starlight scandal broke." Thomas Miller nodded slowly, his weathered face a mix of pride and concern. "We understand, son. It's just, well, there's been some talk back in the old neighborhood. People wondering if all this success might have changed you." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. In the whirlwind of events following Victor's arrest, he'd admittedly neglected his roots. "Tell you what," he said, an idea forming. "Why don't we have a small, family-only dinner next week? Just us, at that little Italian place you both love?" The relief on his parents' faces was palpable. As they moved away to sample the hors d'oeuvres, Olivia leaned in close to Ethan. "That was sweet of you," she said softly. "I know how much your parents mean to you." Ethan nodded, his eyes following his parents as they navigated the crowd. "They sacrificed everything for me, Liv. I just want to make them proud." As the evening wore on, Ethan found himself drawn into conversation after conversation, discussing everything from corporate reform to his upcoming book on ethical leadership. Through it all, Olivia remained by his side, her presence a constant source of strength and support. It wasn't until the party was winding down that Ethan noticed something odd. A man he didn't recognize, dressed in the hotel staff uniform, seemed to be paying particular attention to him and Olivia. Every time Ethan glanced in his direction, the man would quickly look away or busying himself with some task. "Liv," Ethan murmured, trying to keep his voice casual. "That waiter over by the bar. Does he seem off to you?" Olivia's eyes flicked briefly in the direction Ethan indicated. Her expression remained neutral, but Ethan felt her tense slightly beside him. "Now that you mention it," she said quietly, "I've noticed him watching us all evening. Could be nothing, but in our line of work, it pays to be cautious," Ethan finished. It was a mantra they'd adopted in the months since Victor's arrest, a reminder that their actions had made them both targets. As if on cue, Ethan's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He fished it out of his pocket, expecting another congratulatory message. Instead, what he saw made his blood run cold. "Enjoying the party, Miller? Savor it while you can. Your fall will be even more spectacular than your rise. VB." Ethan's hand shook slightly as he showed the message to Olivia. Her eyes widened, then narrowed in determination. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Now." As they made their excuses and hurried towards the exit, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The waiter he'd noticed earlier was nowhere to be seen, but the back of Ethan's neck prickled with the sensation of unseen eyes following their every move. Once safely ensconced in a taxi, Olivia pulled out her own phone. "I'm calling Detective Reeves," she said, her fingers flying over the keypad. "If Victor's found a way to make contact from prison, we need to know about it." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He'd known, on some level, that Victor wouldn't go down without a fight. But he'd allowed himself to hope that with the former CEO behind bars, the worst was behind them. Now, as the New York skyline blurred past the taxi window, Ethan realized that their ordeal was far from over. In fact, it might be just beginning. The following days were a flurry of activity. Detective Reeves and his team launched an investigation into how Victor had managed to send the threatening text, but so far, they'd come up empty-handed. The number was untraceable, and Victor's prison logs showed no unauthorized communications. Ethan and Olivia found themselves looking over their shoulders constantly, jumping at shadows and second-guessing every interaction. The carefree joy of their engagement celebration felt like a distant memory. One afternoon, as they sat in Olivia's apartment poring over security measures with a private consultant, Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, surprised to see his mother's number. "Hey, Mom," he answered, trying to keep his voice light. "Everything okay?" Eleanor Miller's voice came through, tight with worry. "Ethan, sweetheart. I think someone's been in the house." Ethan sat up straight, immediately on alert. "What? Are you and Dad all right? What happened?" "We're fine, just shaken up," Eleanor assured him. "We came home from the grocery store and, well, nothing's missing, but things are out of place. And there was this envelope on the kitchen table." Ethan's heart raced. "An envelope? Did you open it?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No, we were too scared. It's addressed to you, Ethan. In handwriting I've never seen before." Ethan exchanged a worried glance with Olivia, who had moved closer to listen in on the conversation. "Okay, Mom, I need you to listen to me carefully. Don't touch the envelope. I'm going to call Detective Reeves and have him send someone over right away. Pack a bag, you and Dad are going to stay at a hotel tonight, okay?" After reassuring his mother and making the necessary calls, Ethan turned to Olivia, his face pale. "We need to go to my parents' house. Now." The drive to Queens felt interminable. By the time they arrived, police cars were already parked outside the modest two-story home where Ethan had grown up. Detective Reeves met them at the door, his expression grim. "Your parents are safe," he said without preamble. "We've got them set up at a secure location for the night. Forensics is going over the house now, but so far, there's no sign of forced entry." Ethan nodded, trying to process the information. "And the envelope?" Reeves held up an evidence bag containing a simple white envelope. Through the plastic, Ethan could see his name written in an elegant, unfamiliar script. "We've X-rayed it," Reeves explained. "No explosives or harmful substances. Just a single sheet of paper inside. Given the circumstances, we thought you might want to be present when we open it." Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Let's do it." Inside the house, gathered around the kitchen table where Ethan had eaten countless family dinners, Reeves carefully slit open the envelope. A single sheet of high-quality stationery slid out. The message was brief, written in the same flowing script as the envelope. "Mr. Miller, your hubris is truly remarkable. Did you think you could bring down a man like Victor Blackwood without consequences? You've made powerful enemies, young man. Enemies with long memories and longer reaches. Enjoy your moment in the sun while it lasts. The shadows are coming for you, and this time, there will be nowhere to hide. Consider this a courtesy warning. The next move is ours." The letter was unsigned, but at the bottom of the page was a small, embossed symbol, a phoenix rising from flames. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. He'd seen that symbol before, in the Starlight Industries documents that had started this whole ordeal. "Project Phoenix," he whispered. Olivia gripped his hand tightly. "Ethan? What is it?" He turned to her, his eyes wide with realization. "It's bigger than Victor. All of this, Starlight Industries, the embezzlement, everything, it's just the tip of the iceberg." Detective Reeves leaned forward, his face intense. "What are you saying, Miller?" Ethan's mind raced, connecting dots he'd previously overlooked. Victor Blackwood isn't working alone. He never was. There's an entire network behind him, powerful people who've been pulling the strings all along. As the implications of his words sank in, a heavy silence fell over the room. The threat they faced was far greater than any of them had imagined. Olivia was the first to break the silence. "So what do we do now?" Ethan squared his shoulders, a determination settling over him that he hadn't felt since the early days of their investigation into Starlight Industries. "We do what we've always done," he said firmly. "We find the truth, and we expose it. No matter the cost." As they left the house that night, Ethan took one last look at the home where he'd grown up. The place that had always represented safety and love now felt tainted, violated by the intrusion of this unseen enemy. He made a silent vow then and there. He would protect his family, protect Olivia, and see this through to the end. Victor Blackwood and his shadowy allies had underestimated him once before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. Little did Ethan know, the true test of his resolve was yet to come. The forces arrayed against him were more powerful and far-reaching than he could have ever imagined. And they were about to unleash a storm that would shake the very foundations of his world. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Olivia threw themselves into unraveling the mystery of Project Phoenix. They pored over every scrap of information they had, reaching out to contacts in journalism, finance, and law enforcement. Slowly, a picture began to emerge, one that was as terrifying as it was vast. Project Phoenix, it seemed, was not just a scheme to embezzle funds from Starlight Industries. It was a complex network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of government and business, with tentacles spreading across the globe. One evening, as they sat surrounded by stacks of documents and scribbled notes in Olivia's apartment, Ethan leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. "It's like trying to fight a hydra," he said wearily. "Every time we think we've got a handle on it, two more heads pop up." Olivia reached out, taking his hand in hers. "We're making progress, Ethan. Slow progress, but progress nonetheless. We can't give up now." Ethan squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her unwavering determination. "You're right, as always. It's just, sometimes I wonder if we're in over our heads. These people, they have resources we can't even imagine." As if in response to his words, Ethan's phone buzzed with an incoming email. He glanced at it, then did a double take. "It's from an encrypted address," he said, sitting up straight. Subject line, "The truth about Phoenix." Olivia leaned in close as Ethan opened the email. Inside was a single line of text, "Midnight. Pier 17. Come alone if you want answers." They exchanged a long look, weighing the potential risks against the promise of new information. Finally, Ethan nodded. "I have to go." Olivia's grip on his hand tightened. "Not alone, you don't. We're in this together, remember?" As the clock struck midnight, Ethan and Olivia made their way cautiously along the deserted pier. The only sound was the gentle lapping of waves against the wooden pylons and the distant hum of the city. "I don't like this," Ethan muttered, his eyes scanning the shadows. "It feels like a trap." Before Olivia could respond, a figure emerged from behind a stack of crates. Both Ethan and Olivia tensed, ready to run, but the man held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Martinez," the stranger said, his voice low and urgent. "I'm glad you came. We don't have much time." As the man stepped into the dim light cast by a nearby lamppost, Ethan's jaw dropped in shock. He recognized that face. It had been plastered all over the news just a few months ago. You're Samuel Roth," Ethan stammered. "Victor Blackwood's former CFO. You disappeared right before the Starlight scandal broke." Samuel nodded grimly. "I've been in hiding, trying to stay alive long enough to get this information to someone who can use it." He pulled a USB drive from his pocket. Everything you need to know about Project Phoenix is on here. Names, dates, financial records, it's all there. Olivia stepped forward, her journalistic instincts kicking in. Why are you doing this? Why now? Samuel's eyes darted nervously around the pier. Because I can't live with the guilt anymore. And because I know they're coming for me. I probably won't survive the week, but maybe this information can make a difference. He pressed the USB drive into Ethan's hand. Be careful, he warned. What you're about to uncover, it goes deeper than you can imagine. Trust no one. Before they could ask any more questions, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the night. Samuel's eyes widened in fear. They've found me. Go, now. And whatever you do, don't let them get that drive. Ethan and Olivia didn't need to be told twice. They took off running, their footsteps echoing on the wooden planks of the pier. Behind them, they could hear shouts and the sound of a struggle. Ethan clutched the USB drive tightly, his heart pounding in his chest as they raced towards the safety of the city streets. As they rounded a corner, the screech of tires filled the air. A black SUV with tinted windows skidded to a stop in front of them, blocking their path. Ethan grabbed Olivia's hand, ready to change direction, but the passenger door flew open. Get in, a familiar voice shouted. To their shock, Detective Reeves was behind the wheel, his face tense with urgency. Now. Without time to question, Ethan and Olivia dove into the vehicle. The tires squealed as Reeves accelerated away from the pier, weaving through the late-night traffic with practiced skill. How did you know? Olivia gasped, trying to catch her breath. Reeves' eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. I've been keeping tabs on both of you since the threats started. When I saw you heading to the pier, I knew something was up. His expression darkened. What happened back there? As Ethan recounted their meeting with Samuel Roth and the USB drive, Reeves' grip on the steering wheel tightened. This is big, he muttered. Bigger than I thought. We need to get you two somewhere safe. The next few hours passed in a blur. Reeves took them to a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a nondescript apartment in a quiet neighborhood. As dawn broke, they gathered around a laptop, ready to unveil the secrets hidden within the USB drive. Wait, Olivia said, her hand hovering over the keyboard. Before we do this, we need to be prepared for what we might find. This information, it could change everything. Ethan nodded, his face set with determination. Whatever it is, we face it together. With a deep breath, Olivia inserted the drive and opened the files. What they saw left them stunned. Project Phoenix was far more than a simple embezzlement scheme. It was a vast, intricate network of corruption that reached into every corner of power, politics, finance, law enforcement, even the media. The list of names involved read like a who's who of the global elite. My God, Reeves whispered, his face pale. This goes all the way to the top. Senators, CEOs, even the Attorney General, Ethan finished, pointing to a particularly damning email chain. As they delved deeper into the files, a clear picture emerged. Project Phoenix was designed to manipulate global markets, rig elections, and consolidate power in the hands of a select few. Starlight Industries had been just one small cog in an enormous machine. Victor Blackwood, Olivia mused, her investigative instincts kicking into high gear. He wasn't the mastermind. He was a fall guy. Ethan's mind raced, connecting dots he'd previously overlooked. Of course. That's why he went down so easily. They sacrificed him to protect the bigger operation. Reeves ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly older and more weary. The question is, what do we do with this information? If we go public, we'll have targets on our backs for the rest of our lives. A heavy silence fell over the room as the magnitude of their discovery sank in. They were three people against a global conspiracy with seemingly limitless resources. The odds were overwhelming. It was Ethan who finally broke the silence. "We have to do it," he said quietly but firmly. "We have to expose them." Olivia reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Ethan, are you sure? This isn't just about us anymore. Your parents, our friends, everyone we care about could be at risk." Ethan met her gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. "I know. But if we don't do this, if we let them win, then everything we've fought for means nothing. All those people they've hurt, all the lives they've ruined, we owe it to them to bring this to light." Reeves nodded slowly. "He's right. But we need to be smart about this. We can't just dump all this information online. We need a plan." For the next several days, the trio worked tirelessly, barely sleeping as they pieced together a strategy. They reached out to trusted contacts in journalism, law enforcement, and even some ethical hackers. Slowly, a network of allies began to form, each ready to play their part in bringing down Project Phoenix. As their plan took shape, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. Just months ago, he'd been a meek assistant, cowed by Victor Blackwood's bullying. Now, he stood at the center of a movement that could reshape the world. The night before they were set to go public, Ethan found Olivia standing on the balcony of the safe house, gazing out at the city lights. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, feeling her lean into his embrace. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured. Olivia sighed, her voice tinged with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "I'm thinking about tomorrow. About how everything is going to change." Ethan nodded, understanding completely. "Are you scared?" "Terrified," Olivia admitted. "But also, ready. Like this is what I've been preparing for my whole life without even knowing it." She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. "What about you? Having any second thoughts?" Ethan shook his head. "No. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm meant to do." He cupped her face gently. "And there's no one I'd rather have by my side." As they sealed their commitment with a kiss, both Ethan and Olivia knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was shining a light on the truth they were about to unveil. Ethan, Olivia, and Reeves gathered in the living room, surrounded by computers and stacks of documents. "Everyone ready?" Reeves asked, his finger hovering over the enter key that would set their plan in motion. Ethan and Olivia exchanged a look, then nodded in unison. "Do it," Ethan said. With a single keystroke, the first domino fell. Across the globe, carefully prepared news stories began to break. Social media exploded with leaked documents and whistleblower testimonies. Law enforcement agencies in multiple countries launched simultaneous raids. The response was immediate and overwhelming. As the day wore on, Ethan, Olivia, and Reeves watched in awe as the empire of corruption they'd uncovered began to crumble. Politicians resigned in disgrace. CEOs were led away in handcuffs. The stock market fluctuated wildly as investors scrambled to distance themselves from tainted companies. But amid the chaos, there was hope. For every corrupt official exposed, honest public servants stepped up to fill the void. Grassroots movements sprang up overnight, demanding transparency and accountability. As night fell, Ethan's phone rang. It was his parents. "Ethan, sweetheart," his mother's voice came through, thick with emotion. "We've been watching the news all day. We're so proud of you." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes. "Thanks, Mom. Are you and Dad okay? Are you safe?" "We're fine," she assured him. "The police have been keeping an eye on us." "But Ethan, what you've done, it's going to change everything, isn't it?" Ethan looked at Olivia, who was deep in conversation with her editor, and Reeves, who was coordinating with other law enforcement agencies. "Yeah, Mom," he said softly. "I think it is." As the days turned into weeks, the full impact of their revelations continued to unfold. There were setbacks, of course. Some of the most powerful figures implicated in Project Phoenix used their resources to fight back, launching smear campaigns and legal challenges. But the tide of public opinion was overwhelmingly on the side of truth. Ethan and Olivia found themselves hailed as heroes, invited to speak at conferences and universities around the world. They used their newfound platform to advocate for stronger corporate oversight and government transparency. Through it all, their relationship deepened, strengthened by the trials they'd faced together. On a warm summer evening, 6 months after the fall of Project Phoenix, Ethan took Olivia back to where it all began, the lobby of the former Starlight Industries building. As they stood there, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, Ethan dropped to one knee. "Olivia Martinez," he said, his voice filled with love and admiration, "you've been my partner in every sense of the word. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me the courage to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost." He pulled out a ring, its diamond catching the light. "Will you be my partner for life? Will you marry me?" Olivia's eyes shimmered with tears of joy as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. As they sealed their engagement with a kiss, cheers erupted around them. They turned to see a crowd had gathered, their parents, Detective Reeves, colleagues, and even some of the people they'd helped along the way. In that moment, Ethan realized that their journey was far from over. There would always be those who abused power, who prioritized greed over the greater good. But now, he and Olivia had the strength, the platform, and the support to make a real difference. The humble assistant who had once been humiliated by his boss had become a beacon of hope for millions. And with Olivia by his side, he knew that together, they could face any challenge that came their way. As they left the building hand in hand, stepping into the warm evening air, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. The future was uncertain, but it was bright with possibility. And he couldn't wait to see what it held. Epilogue. 5 years later, Ethan and Olivia stood on the stage of a packed auditorium, the audience hanging on their every word. They were no longer just whistleblowers or journalists, they had become leaders of a global movement for corporate and government accountability. "It's been a long road," Ethan said, addressing the crowd of students, activists, and business leaders. "But every day, we see signs of real, lasting change." Olivia stepped forward, her hand resting unconsciously on her swollen belly. Their first child was due in just a few months. "The work isn't done," she added. "It may never be truly finished. But as long as there are people willing to stand up for what's right, there's hope." As applause filled the auditorium, Ethan's gaze met Olivia's. In her eyes, he saw the same fire, the same determination that had drawn him to her all those years ago. But now, there was something more, a deep contentment, a shared joy in the life they'd built together. They had faced down corporate giants, exposed global conspiracies, and reshaped the very foundations of power. But in the end, their greatest achievement was the love they'd found in each other, a love forged in adversity, strengthened by shared purpose, and destined to leave a lasting mark on the world. As they left the stage hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold, Ethan knew one thing for certain: the humble man who had once been humiliated by his boss had found something far greater than revenge or success. He had found his true calling, his soulmate, and a purpose that would outlast any corporation or conspiracy. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all.